Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
Well, I'm excited to have a guest with me today, Dr. Smith. So you and I have worked together. I was trying to remember, how long have we worked together?
It has been now probably 8-9 years.
Is it?
It's so, yeah.
We're that old.
Yes, it was several, yeah.
We go way back.
Yeah, well, we didn't have Lucas yet, so he's 8.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, so it's got to be 9.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe even 10 years, gosh.
So we've decided in all those 8 to 9 years that we're way alike. I sometimes will call you and just be like, hey, can you give me your opinion on this? I'm like, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. Right. So I needed somebody who thinks like me.
Just need confirmation.
That I'm not crazy.
Right.
But you and I worked together for a long time, and I wanted to have you on the show today because you have a practice that a lot of my clients think is not possible, which is a fee-for-service practice and not contracted with many insurance companies. And so I do want to get to that and talk to you about that but before we get to that, I want to hear about your practice. I know it, but our listeners don't know about you. So private practice owner for how long?
So we have been here 14 years.
14 years.
14 years. It's a long time.
Did you associate before?
So I worked for a corporation, Dental One, before, and did that for 2.5 years.
Okay.
And then bought this place and started, basically just took over from the doctor. He left one day and I started the next day, and it was just a straight transition from there.
Wow. Did you go full time right from the beginning?
I did, yes. So we do 4 days a week, so it was full time there. And then I worked in a couple of other offices on Fridays, and now I still do a pediatric office on Fridays at this point, which I've been doing now for like almost 8 years as well. So
get your kid fix in.
I do, and that one day is enough. I very much enjoy it, but after that, no. It was one of those things where we were supposed to do it for like maybe a year or two and everything, and then I just enjoyed doing it, so we kept doing it. And it gives me I've got to see a lot of different things that way, and Pedo runs completely different, but I steal lots of ideas from them, and dealing with Medicaid versus insurances versus in our practice, semi fee for service, as in we still file all the insurances, but it helps me be more well rounded to see all the different things. Yeah, you know what's happening on the other side of the fence, right?
Yeah. Which is just good perspective sometimes. Yeah. So, and you remind me. So I know you started 14 years ago. Started 4 full days. And did you have 2 hygienists from the start?
Yes.
Okay.
We had 2 hygienists, and at that time we had the doctor previously had more staff.
Okay.
And then I decided to slim that way down, and so right now we have 2 hygienists. We have 1 front office and 1 assistant, and me, and that's it. And it's an interesting dynamic. It gets pretty crazy sometimes, but everybody is cross-trained to help and do things, and my hygienist can check everybody out, assistant can check everybody out, and my front office will bring patients back, and we just really, I was sitting there sterilizing instruments earlier today, and so, we just try to work as a team to keep the practice smaller, and everything. As you've talked a lot about personalities and things like that, and adding an extra person, we always talk about that, and I just can't quite bring myself to do it. So
you're like, we're good. We're good with status quo. This is good.
It seems to work for now.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's a what I would call a small team with 1 RDA, 1 front, and 2 hygienists. But because we've really focused through the years on making sure that everybody has at least a few skills in different areas. Like if your hygienist has an opening on her schedule, she can easily get up to the front and answer the phones, call her patients. She can even do some minimal checkout if need be.
They can even, both a hygienist also can do insurance. They can enter checks in, they can call on insurance, they can do all those things and stuff, which is very important. And I think they appreciate being able to do those things. gives them more autonomy within the practice. It also helps them see everything that's going on. They just don't camp out in their room and not understand what else is going on in the practice and everything, which I was really big on when we started. Was not only do they need to know their practice, they need to know what's going on my side. Not come get me in the middle of the root canals. Like this part of the schedule is slammed. Don't put me right up against the clock on those times. And everything, and it helps the practice move smoother. And as they've bought in, it works.
It really does. I've been surprised because it's kind of cool, the small team feel. I mean, we're just stepping out of a team meeting now, and I feel like there's a lot of camaraderie, a lot of laughter, a lot of appreciation for one another. It's kind of really just a neat, sweet feeling for sure. But it's interesting because of the model that it is with a small team. Sometimes you can get team members onto the team that don't have that same model. You recently had a hygienist that I was a little bit worried about because she'd been a hygienist for a long time, and I was concerned, like, oh no, is she going to come on this team and be this prima donna, and I can't do this and I can't do that, because she had been doing it for so long. And even her, I mean, it took a minute for her to kind of figure out her place and how she could help when there was downtime. But even, I think just the culture is really strong here. We're all in it together and we all help each other. She stepped right in line.
She did, and I think we had that conversation where I was concerned about that too. But in the atmosphere that we're in right now, I had no other options, and it was better to have somebody than not. And I remember telling you I was going to give her 3 months and see if she kind of joined the team and picked up. And I was pleasantly surprised at how fast she picked things up. And I'm very direct, and so there were certain things, and I was very upfront with her up front. I was like, hey, you know what? We play rock and roll music all day. If you don't like rock and roll music, you're going to have a problem. Well, one day she complained about my music, and I'm like, I did tell you this is what I play all day long, and this is a hard no. You're not changing my music, and everything. And she's like, oh, okay, and I never heard anything about it again, and stuff. But definitely had those prima donna things. She didn't like the candles or the wax things that we had. Like the smell bothered her. I mean, it was all these weird, dumb things, but she was so amazing with the patients and stuff. And I looked up, and like a month later I was like, oh my gosh, this girl, like, she's checking out patients. She had never done that in any practice she had done and everything. She had been the typical sit in a box, and this was her box, and she didn't move out of it. And she's up front calling patients, and she's asking me how to enter insurance. She wanted to learn how to do that because the other hygienist was doing it, so I think she wanted to do it, and it really worked out really, really great.
Yeah.
Everything. So
I think it's pretty cool when you can create that. Sometimes I think small teams can be stressful because, man, one person down and you're like, oh no, yes. What do we do? But that cross-training emphasis, especially when your hygiene department is kind of your biggest department, is so critical in making sure that you've got backup. There was a period of time, I guess that was, August, when your main front office person at the time had resigned.
Yes.
And your hygienist and your assistant stepped up. And when there wasn't a temp, they were stepping in and doing what they knew to do. You obviously had to step up and do more and knew how to do that as well. But as difficult as that was, you guys didn't miss a beat.
Yeah. And it was interesting because during that time it was hard to get a temp, and so one day we'd have a temp, one day we wouldn't. And even this past week my assistant was sick when she came back from the beach and got sick, and so we had to send her home, and we got a temp 2 of the days, but one day I didn't get a temp.
Yeah.
And so Caitlin was coming over and doing fillings with me, and she'd hold the suction while I did the filling real quick, and then I would do their blood pressure, and I would check them out, and I'd move them up front. And it was just like, we just, it's the atmosphere we created an opportunity for her to do other stuff, and she thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah. That
she got to sit in on, helping me do this, and we cut off a crown, and we did some other cool stuff while we were there, and stuff. Most of them were post-op. We cut it down, but those few things she was able to walk over, help me with that, and then went back over to her side and did her hygiene and stuff, and everything. And vice versa, when we're down hygienist, I clean teeth, and my assistant absolutely hates to sit beside me while I clean teeth and stuff. She's bored out of her mind, but you know what? She, sits there and does it and suffers through it and moves on to the next task, and stuff. So, and it's a great group, and they love to pick on me, and that's okay as long as they're all, it's their team activity is to pick on me sometimes.
You're like, I can take it. If this means y'all are unified, I can take it.
That means you showed up on time and then I'm okay.
Well, and it's been, fairly a consistent team. Even though you've had transition over the years, as every practice has, you've had some core people that have really kept the culture going. And I think that's, it's one of the best aspects, I think, of your practice is that there's just this really sweet camaraderie that is present here really on a daily basis. Even when I just drop by and observe, I feel like we're always looking to help each other out, and we have the skills to be able to jump in and help a teammate out.
And I think that's a big thing when I interview them and I start them out and everything. It's like, I tell them up front, you're going to do everything, and that's how we do things, and that's our environment. And it's like, come and see, and you'll see how it works, and everything. And especially the hygienists, they're sitting there going, wait, I've never checked a patient out, I've never done this, I've never done that, and stuff. And I'm like, that's okay, we'll teach you how to do it, if you want to buy in. And when they buy in, it's great, and stuff. So, and I think having it, we've lost a lot of staff and we've picked up new people, but we've been blessed to have it almost one at a time instead of multiple at a time, which I think has been good, because then the new person comes in and the other three kind of pick them up and
get them indoctrinated in that culture.
Hey, this is how Dr. Smith does this. This is how he does this. This is what, he only has a few pet peeves, but don't cross those, and
don't do these.
Yes. Don't show up late, or that's not good, don't complain about his music. Don't do but outside of that, I'm okay.
Yeah. Thinking back on the last few years, especially since the pandemic, what do you feel like are some of the challenges that you've faced either as a practice or as a practice owner?
COVID was awful. I remember coming up here you actually gave me this idea. You gave me a whole list of things to do while we were out of the office, because I tried to keep the team together as long as possible. And then we ultimately had to do what everybody else did and send everybody home. But I think for like 2 weeks, we kept everybody here and we painted the office. And I even went to Home Depot and got this floor, and we started putting floor down, and we did just simple tasks that we could do. And we even had one day where 2 of the girls were up front just calling patients and just checking on them, saying like, hey, how you doing? You doing okay? Can we do anything for you? We're just thinking about you, and stuff, and just kind of trying to give them something to do, during that time. But that was tough. I mean, I remember one of my patients was in just the other day. He actually came in during COVID. I had to take a tooth out on him.
Oh, no.
And he had called, and I was like, well, not really supposed to be seeing patients, but I'm up here, actually, I think I was painting or doing something. And I'm like, if you want to come up, we can, I can take care of you. So I'm taking out a tooth by myself, and stuff. And that, so those were the challenge. And then coming back from that, I lost several team members because our hygienist was the first one to leave because her kids weren't going to school. And so her and her husband couldn't make it work. And so she had to quit. And that was the first one to fall. And then we were blessed and got one hygienist that came in and picked up after her. And then we lost another one. And then we picked up another one. And then we lost another one. And it's, I think my assistant is the only one that's still with me from that,
You're right.
that point. Everybody else is new and probably changed over 2 or 3 times, at that point. And so I think that's been the biggest challenge. I probably changed team during this time more than I did the previous 10 years before that.
Yeah.
And everything. And so that's been probably the biggest, headache is constantly training new people.
And it just becomes tiresome over time to just, oh no, another one's quitting. And
yes, I remember I was so upset when one quit one time because I had hired her straight out of school. I had trained her. She was actually doing really good. And then she jumped ship to somebody else for like another $1 an hour. I'm like, well, you should have come and talked to me first. Like, I invested so much into you and everything. And it was just like, but that's how things were going at that time. People were just, all my friends were having the same problem. They're losing people left and right. Everybody was moving around. So that's been the different, kind of deal. And everything. I think dealing with patients has been about the same. People really kind of value healthcare a little bit more, especially since then. So it seems like, at least for us, we've weathered the storm pretty well. I think we were talking about that. I think those relationships we built with the patients kind of transcended over COVID, and we got most of those people back and coming back and everything. So
yeah, I feel like you guys did a great job of really focusing on the patient relationship, even like when you had the 2 weeks that you were trying to keep your team busy, just taking the time to call and check in on patients, and for no other reason. We weren't trying to schedule them or do anything, but just check in on them and make sure they're doing okay. And I think that just keeps patients knowing that you've got their best interest in mind. And I feel like you guys have always prioritized that, and it's caused this really interesting thing that post-pandemic, you really haven't had a slowdown. It's been this pretty steady pace, and you've gained new patients, in this whole, few years since the pandemic. And outside of staffing, I feel like you've been able to really keep status quo and continue to grow, which I think has been hard. And when I think about you, because a lot of times we talk about trends, what's going on out in the world, and oftentimes you're an outlier to those trends. When others are experiencing a slowdown, I check with you and you're like, nope, we're had another up month, and I'm like, well, here you go again, breaking the mold. But I do think so much of that comes back to this emphasis that you guys have put on this relationship with the patient, and that really comes first. And then that environment that your team has, it's a very friendly, happy place to come. And I think that keeps people coming back. And
it's really funny during our meetings, because this team gets so annoyed because I'll walk patients out and I'll do all this stuff, and they're like, that's my job and stuff. And it's like, yeah, but I had the time and I wanted to walk them. We were talking about, something important, I'm sure, probably their last trip they went on or something, nothing to do, but it's just that extra little bit. And it is, I've gotten to know these people, and I do care about them. I had one girl this morning that she's 25. She's a nurse now. She works at, down in Dallas somewhere, and everything. And we were talking about it, and she was her family was one of the first patients that I saw when I came here.
Wow.
And so she was 12 years old when I first saw her, stuff. And I am not that old. And so, but it's really cool to see some of those, and everything. And you start looking at it, and we have a lot of those. We've lost a lot of patients because people have moved, and, you can't make everybody happy. You can say all those things. But really, honestly, looking back, we have a lot from those beginning, 3, 4, 5 years that have just really stuck with us here and stuff.
Well, and that's what kind of gets me to this reason that I wanted to have you on the podcast, because I think, we hear so much now about these small practices, good old fashioned, just good practices, that a lot of people think don't have a chance in the marketplace anymore. And you hear oh, you better sell, you better move on, you better get bigger, you better... And I think your practice really stands out to me a lot, because you've experienced tremendous growth over these years. When we kind of look back and rewind back, it's like the practice has consistently grown without having to really grow your team that much. And you're doing it. You are, to me, proof that a small business dental practice can still exist in this marketplace, and that patients are looking for that. And I think that's what I really want the listeners to kind of hear from your perspective, how you've managed to do that. And I think, of course, one of the things that you mentioned early on in this episode is that you have made a choice to kind of work with insurance differently. And I want to hear your thought process on that, and how you've done it, and how that's had an impact on your practice success.
And I think you hit it on it. It's building the relationship, but it's also that this is what patients are looking for. We hear it all the time. It's they come over from one of the corporate offices, which have gotten really smart by not naming their offices a corporate name, right? And so we have one across the street that a lot of people don't even realize that it's a big part of a corporate office and everything, which also got bought out by Ideal Dental. And so now there's a big sign on there and stuff. But before, it was just named an office and stuff, and it was part of one of these smaller corporations and everything. And so they would go over there, and we'd get them over here, and they would it was never the work. They were just complaining about how they were taken care of, and they didn't get calls back, they things didn't work out, and so I kind of figured out that's really what patients want, and I always joke you can teach anybody to prep a filling and nobody sees it but me, and everything. But, if the patient feels like you took care of them, and stuff. And it's also, if something goes wrong, taking care of it right away. And that's usually where we get patients from, these guys around the corners. When something goes wrong and they're in network with everything, their margins are so small, they don't want to fix it, they don't want to take care of them, and then they end up in our office and everything. And so they're seeking that out. It just, it's a challenge though. And it is something that you have to work for. And that's something that we wanted from the very beginning was this small practice, kind of hometown type practice within the city. I mean,
because I was going to say, there's no lack of competition around you.
No, there's plenty around, and I mean, we're in major, right between two major cities, in a kind of a small little nook, and everything. But yeah, I mean, most of my patients work in downtown Dallas and, Addison and Plano and stuff and everything. And so it's a big, growth area. The hard part is not working Saturdays. You get those people, and stuff. But yeah, it's a challenge, and it's hard work, and you have to be willing to put the work in, both to care about the patients and learn about them. And we were talking about this earlier. I had one hygienist who can't remember anything, but she was awesome about writing everything down, and stuff. And I do a pretty good job of remembering people, so I don't write as much down, but I make sure I remember who their kids are, who their spouses are, what they're doing in their life, and things like that. And as we've seen them more and more, it makes that easier to do, which was one of the hygienists was saying today. She's getting better at that because she's been in the practice for a while, and stuff.
And it does create that small town feel when you can go back, when a patient can come back in and their doctor remembers their kids, or even if they don't come here, remembers their kids, or remembers the last vacation, or remembers where they work, and you can kind of pick up the conversation where you left off, and how's it going at Walmart headquarters? How's that been lately? Blah blah blah. Right. That it creates that small town feeling in what is not a small town, right? But you're creating this feeling of, I'm known in this practice, and therefore I don't want to go anywhere else.
And that's something that was really important to me, is to make sure that people felt important when they came here and stuff. And that was important, and that's what we did. And we even said, if we got to eat, cheese and bologna sandwiches for a couple of years till we built the practice, that's what we would do. We're coming from a corporate office. I knew that's not what I wanted to do. I made lots of money there, but I couldn't remember people because I was seeing so many patients and stuff. And so when we took this practice over, the doctor he was an older doctor. He was not in network with everything, but he was in network with several. And so we made that decision that day to make that cut. And the only one that I did not get rid of on day one, I think, was Blue Cross and Delta.
Okay.
Well, we dumped all the other ones, and he had already dumped several of them, so it made it a little bit easier.
He was in the process of that.
He was in the process of dumping them, I think, a couple a year, and so he only had, I think, maybe 7 or 8 is what he was, and everything. And looking back, I probably would have done 2 at a time, maybe, instead of just dumping them all at one time. But what we decided we would do is we would still honor the hygiene fees that we would get from the patient or from the insurance. And so we, I think you call it balance billing, right? So, and that's one thing that I do is no invoice goes out without me looking at it first. Yeah. I do end up writing a lot of stuff off, but it's because I'm not writing anything off on the other side. I'm not taking the immediate write-off from the insurance. We're basically doing our own write-offs, and we're looking at it from that perspective. And we have a number, and we try to keep it under that number, and it's significantly better than if we were in network with everything. And I think we find that MetLife, for example, most of my MetLife insurances pay our full fee, or I think they pay $1 short of what we charge for a cleaning. Yeah. And so most of the time I get those. But then sometimes I get ones that don't pay me very much. Maybe they pay the in-network fee and everything, and we still write those off. And we look at the numbers at the end of the month and make sure that our adjustments are within that range, and we always come out way, way, way ahead. And I think that's the hardest part for a lot of people to understand, especially when I talk to some of my friends that want to do it, and I start explaining that, and they're like, yeah, I don't want to do that, because it's really easy to print it off and send an invoice. But we felt like if we started doing that, patients would not come back to get their treatment done. They would see it as, it would just cost them too much. Yeah. And when we were doing this thing, this was back when the bank, all the financial stuff was going on. I mean, it was not the best time. When I took over the practice was 2010, and it was not good times. What was it? That was when the banks were failing, and they had to bail them out and all this stuff and everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, why did I do this? And then I dumped the insurance at the same time and stuff. So I was like, you know what? Let's just go for it.
Let's go all in on this.
Yeah. And so, but that was one thing. And still today, I mean, I've got a stack of invoices sitting on my desk right now, and I still look at every single one of them before they go out, because I want to make sure that a patient's not charged for something that they shouldn't be charged for, because it just, again, it creates that better environment for the patients. And you know what, if I get paid almost everything, 90% for that crown, then I'm going to write that other 10% off, and I still come out way ahead. Where with MetLife, you're looking at writing off 35 to 40%, and so it's just, it doesn't make sense in my case. And so we do a lot of balance billing. We do a lot of, and there's a few insurances that we've decided we can't do that anymore with. GEHA is one of them. Guardian is kind of getting that way, where their fees are so low and our hygienists are so expensive now and our costs are so expensive that we looked at it and said, those are not enough. And I actually had a conversation with a patient that had GEHA the other day, and I told her this, and I was like, you know what, the rest of the year I'll take care of your family. We'll do the same thing that we've done, but starting next year, I'm not going to accept their fees anymore and everything. And you know what, they liked this so much that they went out and they're looking for a different insurance and see if they can find something else. It may work, it may not, but I think building that relationship with her, at least they're trying to come, instead of, what a lot of people think is people are just going to start yelling at you for not taking their insurance. And I've had people do that too. I've had people get upset, like not understand why I don't take Cigna. Everybody else takes Cigna. Why do you not take Cigna? And stuff. And I'm like, well, you know what? We do take it. We will file it for you. We will do all the legwork for you. Nothing changes in that case. And whatever we get from for hygiene, that's what we take. But on my crown, on my filling, on my, treatment side, that's where we get, that's where we make up for it.
That's the upside.
That's the upside, is getting paid my full fee for a crown. Because I see it, like I have a buddy of mine that's in network with everything. And when he goes up on his fees, he never sees it. So his hygienist fees going up, his cost is going up, everything's going up, but he can't generate any more money because he's in network with every insurance that flattens their fees at this amount. He can raise his fees to the moon, but he's never going to see that except for on the few patients that come in that don't have insurance, and they're usually very conscious about how much they're spending and everything. So
exactly. Well, and a couple of things that you've said here that I think are so important to show that this is still a model that can work. You're a living testament to that. It is working beautifully. Is you're going to put in effort one way or the other. So if you're going to be in network, you're going to be putting in a lot of effort into, verifying benefits, filing appeals, trying to get the claims paid, trying to find ways to charge for things that insurance isn't going to cover so that you can get a little bit of upside there. And sending invoices. I mean, the work's going to be there. What you're doing is you're going, okay, we're also going to have work, but it's going to be done on the back end. And we're really going to take a look at what insurance paid. Can we live with that? And if we can, then you're catching that on the back end. Your front office lady is printing those invoices for you, putting it all together for you, but you're doing one final check to see if there's anything that needs to be written off. And that may sound like a lot of work. That's not in the grand scheme of things, because it's also work to deal with a negative review or an angry patient because we didn't handle finances correctly. So you are putting in some legwork, but it's time well spent because you are very intimately familiar with how much you're writing off on each patient, each insurance company. Individually, you're looking at that in those invoices, but then also at the end of the month, you're coming back and looking and making sure your total write-offs still make sense in the grand scheme of things. And so it's work, yes, but it's not, I mean, give us an example of how long it may take you to walk through a stack of invoices.
Oh, usually I usually do them on Wednesdays, and it typically takes me less than an hour to go through them all. Now, of course, an office transitioning from a insurance practice to it probably has more patients than I have, because you guys have to see more patients than I do on a time, which is really good. I mean, my hygienists get an hour, which most of my buddies that are doing, insurance are doing 45 minutes or maybe even accelerated or something like that. So I don't know if you can compare that completely, but still, I mean, I get all my stack. I can go through them pretty quick. And really, honestly, because I do that, I usually pick up on them pretty quick, even just looking at them. And I know, hey, this is a hygiene, this is a hygiene, this is a hygiene, and sometimes I write off $150 on a patient, but sometimes I write off $2. And when I add them all together, I come out way, way, way ahead. And that seems to be the concept that's really hard for some people to understand, is that I think Dentrix kind of works against us as well, because it takes the write-off for us. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a patient that's in network with Delta, which unfortunately I still am in network with that one, that's the only one, is that, you get $59 for your cleaning. But Dentrix sets it up so that's the fee there, so you never see the write-off there. So if you were to go through the sheet and put your numbers in and take your write-off, you're not seeing that number because you're taking it from that. If you took your actual fee that you're doing and then took those write-offs, then you'd see that number was much, much, much higher. I take it from my top number, from the number that I'm actually charging, and then I take all the write-offs that I do. And it creates a headache sometimes, and especially when we're really busy and everything. But I set aside an hour every Wednesday, and that's when I do it. Yeah. And I have a little folder, and she puts it in there, and I go through them pretty quickly and everything. And then, there's some that come back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, why does this patient owe me $500? And stuff. So then we got to go back, and we find out that this was a very motivated patient who did a bunch of work, and then we find out that their insurance is trash, and it's like, oh, darn, and so then you got to make that decision there. I would typically write that off because for me, and I think I kind of put this into marketing, we want to keep patients happy, and we want to, I don't want them writing bad reviews about me. I want them sending patients to me, and stuff. But then we know moving forward, say, hey, look, this insurance isn't going to pay what we think it, so then we can go from there, kind of like we did with the patient with GEHA. But if it's like Cigna that just paid the network fee, well, then I end up writing that stuff off. Next time we know we're going to end up charging more. And we make a lot of flags of send a pre-D before we do this, and lots of notes on patients I can charge for that.
That's what I love about this model too, is that your communication is clear. So it's almost like you just said with that example, you get a patient in here, new patient, you're unfamiliar with that insurance, and so you charge everything out. Which, by the way, little side note, you charge full fee out on everything. So as far as fair dealings and making sure that you're upright and ethical, you charge everything out. So a crown is a crown is a crown. It's the same price. You just may take some liberties because you're not contracted on the back end to write some things off specifically on preventative. But let's say you've got this patient that comes in and now they've got a $500 balance. I love your mindset towards it, because a dentist may look at that and go, $500, there's no way I'm writing that off. But you see that as a learning opportunity. It's like, okay, now I know about this insurance plan. I didn't previously know, but now I know. Let's not poke a bear and make this patient unhappy. Let's go ahead and write that off. And yes, ouch, that's a hard pill to swallow, $500. But I then get to have a really clear dialogue with that patient. Hey, this is how your insurance pays. This is unexpected. We didn't know this. Here's what we can do going forward to make sure that you're not left with a big bill. And oh, by the way, I went ahead and just as a courtesy, I wrote that amount off because I don't want you to have to pay that. Well, now the patient has had clear communication and they can decide. Dr. Smith has clearly said going forward, he's not going to write that off. We can send pre-Ds to get a general idea. But even if they leave the practice and go somewhere else, they're going to look back and think very positively about that equation because you were honest, you wrote off $500, and there's a very real chance that they will send other people to you because they trust you.
And it actually happens all the time. I have patients that they put on the thing that they were referred by somebody, and I'm like, I haven't seen that person in 3 years or 4 years or something like that, and stuff. And we've had patients that have ended up with DMO plans or something like that where they can't come see us anymore. And after 3 or 4 years, they show up back in the office, and stuff because, they had a good experience. And as soon as they switched jobs or something like that, they got a different insurance, they came back to us and everything. And so I think it's just that every single day taking it and going, just treat people good. And if you can do good things for them, do good things for them. If you write off a couple extra things in the great scheme of things, I think you're right. If you just look at that one number and look at that, most people would be like, you're insane and stuff. But I look at the whole month and the whole thing, and I look at it and I go, you know what, I only wrote off 13% this month. Yeah. If I was in network with everything, I would have wrote off 35%. I still come up way ahead in that one. Yeah. And most of our months are somewhere between 10 and 15. And we kind of keep it right there. We've had a few a little higher, a few a little lower, but I think our average is about 13 or 14%. Well,
I think that's key too, because while you're making an individual decision to write off in that moment, you are still collectively evaluating. So you're very in tune with the numbers. You're not just like gut feeling, oh yeah, I should write that $500 off, and let's write that $2 off, and let's write that $2,000 off. You are very carefully monitoring that to make sure that your write-offs don't get out of whack. Right. And when those numbers have been pushed up past that 15% mark, you have a very clear vision of why, because you were involved in the individual decisions of those write-offs. So like with GEHA, you knew, hey, I'm consistently seeing that we're writing off too much, and our collective monthly total is creeping up. So we're going to stop writing that off, and I'm going to have individual conversations with all these patients, and we'll do it differently going forward. But it's a very mathematical decision that you're making that keeps you in check, so that it's not all feely.
Right. And that's what I would say, one of your ones on numbers and how in depth you got and stuff like that. I'm definitely a numbers person, so we sit there and talk about that all the time. And we both enjoy talking about it, and we have our little sheet. And I mean, the first thing I showed you when you got here was, hey, this is where we were, this were our write-offs, this is what my hygienist did, this is what I did, this was our numbers from the last year. I mean, it's in a little spreadsheet, it's little boxes, and I just fill them in every month. But it gives us a good pulse of where the practice is. And I have a pretty good feeling going through as I'm writing them off, since I'm doing that and everything. But it's really beneficial to see that at the end of the month and go, hey, you know what, I wrote off more this month, why did I do that? And go back and see. And we were talking about it, I did some work for some of the doctors around the area, their staff. And so I was very generous in several of them, and that's why my numbers were off a little bit, and everything. And so it's just going back and accounting for, okay, well, why was this number higher, than it has been and everything and stuff. So
yeah. I think that's, again, if for anybody that would be looking to kind of make a transition, again, I think about you a lot when I'm talking with clients that are nervous about making an insurance cut, because it's an unknown world. How do you go from this insurance mindset to this, which is really just primarily non-contract, but you also do it in a way that's relatively easy for the patient. Most of the time they're preventative, you're going to take what insurance pays, and so that makes it very palatable. And then you get the upside on the treatment, because you're getting 80% of full fee rather than 80% of a discount fee.
And it's tough to deal with the hygiene and the preventative, because I'm sure everybody's heard this, is I'm here for my free cleaning.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, way back in the day, we allowed them to start using that terminology, and now it's like, no, it's not free. I get paid for that. Like, I'm not doing anything for free, but that's what the patient perceives. And so if you start charging the patient, $20, $30, they start sitting there going, well, why am I getting charged? I've never been charged before, and everything. And so it was a decision we made a long time ago that we would accept the fee of the insurance. I think that's how we phrase it. Mm-hmm. So we accept the fee of the insurance for the preventative, but not for any treatment at all, and everything. And so if we know an insurance is a little bit weak or doesn't pay it very well, we have flags on there that we need to send a predetermination for any major treatment. Because with fillings, we can get pretty close, but a crown, we don't want to end up $300 or $400 off, and everything. And so we'll send that, and then the patient gets to make the decision once we send a predetermination, and everything. And I think the most important thing too, you kind of hit on it earlier, is that we're very honest with the patients, but we never use the words in-network, out-of-network. We never use the word fee-for-service.
Nope.
And, it's like we accept all insurances. If we get pushed, then we're like, what, Dr. Smith does not contract with any insurances so that he can take care of his patients the way that he wants to, and everything. And we've had some people decide not to come to us because of that, but most do.
Yeah.
And when they do come in, then, we had a healthy new patient this month. And when they do come in, I think they feel the difference in the, atmosphere. They feel the difference. And that's exactly what the conversation was today, is like, it's important that every single patient that walks in the door feels special and feels like we care about them. And it's not hard, because I really do.
Yeah.
It's not
fake.
Yeah, it's not a fake. It's not a show. It's not, people pick up on that. They know if it is, and stuff. But, I always tell the hygienist, it's that extra 5 minutes, and stuff. I'll sit on the counter and we'll talk about Disney, and we'll talk about, their kids' football. We're talking, like, I'm done doing the exam. I'm done all that stuff, and everything. And it's just that extra 5 minutes that didn't hurt me at all makes all the difference to the patient in the world, because they don't feel like they got rushed out, stuff.
And you've got the time to do that because of the choices that you've made from an insurance standpoint.
Right.
In today's day and age, if you were contracted with all these insurance companies, it would be a volume practice, and you would have to see more patients than you see. You'd have to have more staff members than you have, and you've got the 5 minutes to be able to sit and chat with them and make them feel comfortable because of the business decisions that you've made. And it still is a model that works. I think that's what's that's such a myth out there that this type of practice doesn't work, because you are sitting here a living testament to the fact that it does work, and your practice isn't struggling. You are, I mean, of course you've had your challenges from a staffing standpoint, but a lot of people think, oh, nobody's going to go to a non-contract office. Like, everybody wants in-network. No, you're seeing more patients than you've ever seen before. You have consistent new patients. The practice numbers are growing each month. Yeah. We are seeing a consistent, and have continued to see a consistent growth over these years. So it is not a model that's dying. It's very vibrant and can absolutely work.
Well, I think we were talking about it. Of course, COVID was awful. And then 2021, we kind of got back on track, but it was still a roller coaster. And then last year was one of my best years. And then this year, if things continue on the track, it will be the best year that we've had. And so that's even after all the meltdown, all the crazy things we had to do during COVID, which is, luckily so far behind us now, and everything. But I think that's what it is. It's possible if you want to put the work into it and do it. And it's just, it takes some checks and balances. Yeah. It takes a lot of work with your team and explaining how to word things. And it's, again, not trying to confuse anybody. We're not trying to trick anybody. I'm very upfront with patients when they start asking and everything, that this is why we do it, and this is why, so that we can take care of people, so I can send my crowns to the lab that I want to send them to, why they fit perfect right off the bat, instead of sending them to China. Or I think one of the girls was laughing earlier today because we were talking about that we just send them down the street and stuff. And it's like, but I tell patients that to make a point that I don't send them to China or India or Costa Rica, which they've heard about and they know. I'm like, I send them down the street to another lab in Fort Worth. Yeah. Like, it's right there, and stuff. And it makes people feel better about it. But I'm able to do that because I'm getting my full fee for my crown.
You have those choices. Yes. Those choices are your choices with your business model.
Which, yes, I'm adding some work over here with the invoice and doing some of the other stuff we do with the insurance and doing all that stuff. But I'm helping myself over here on this because my crowns fit better and things move faster, and I'm able to spread out my day so that I can visit with patients and I can go up front and make sure everything is running the way that it's supposed to. I can go in. The hygienist was complaining about me popping in and just talking to people today, and stuff. And so, got a new plan for that. I won't scare them anymore and everything. But I do, like, if I'm walking down the hall, like, I'll hit every room as I'm walking down the hall and just say hi to whoever's in there, and hey, blah 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 is going to take really good care of you today, and things like that. And it's just making them feel comfortable here and making them confident that we're going to take care of them. And then when we do have issues, I do take care of them. My newest front office person just thought it was the craziest thing. I had a patient and I did a crown like 6 or 7 years ago, and he broke it in half. And I was like, hey, schedule him, let's make him a new crown, and stuff. And I didn't charge him for it. Yeah. And he's a great patient. He comes every 6 months. He's got lots of work done, and stuff. And she's like, it's over 5 years. You should be charging me, or at least charge the insurance. I was like, you know what? My policy is anything goes wrong, anything happens. I had a patient swallow theirs one time. I still made it for him. I remade it for him, and stuff. The good news is that doesn't happen very often. I can probably count on 2 hands how many crowns I have remade since COVID. And so it doesn't happen very often. But it's a building that relationship with that patient, and that patient then goes and tells other people. And that's why most of our patients come from word of mouth, is that it gives me the freedom to take care of those people, where if I was in network with stuff, I couldn't do those things because the margin is so slim,
so tight,
that if you write anything off or you do anything, you're taking 35% and then taking another 5% off and stuff. We were talking about that with care credit earlier today. If your patient takes care or uses care credit and you are in network with Delta, you already took 35% off. Now you're taking another 5% off so that they can pay it out, and everything. It's the math starts to not make sense, and it starts to get tough and everything. But it's not an easy. I can't just print out invoices and send them out. I do have to do some legwork on it.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, is that if you're willing to put the thought process in, if you're willing to put the training into your team, if you're willing to really develop relationships with the patients, it is a model that's still valuable to patients. They're still seeking it out. You've had a lot of new patients last month that are seeking you out, again, knowing that you're not contracted with their insurance plan, but they're choosing you anyway. Right. So it is a myth that patients aren't looking for this.
I think the bad word with, or the bad, is the fee for service. People immediately think that they pay cash outright and that their insurance is basically not used, or they have to file it themselves or something like that. And we do exactly the same thing that every other contracted insurance does. We send it to the insurance. We fight when they deny things. We take care of everything on our side and everything. And then when they, when we get it back, then we reevaluate where we're at and everything. And so I think because we do that, then the patients don't feel it as much. And I was telling somebody the other day, it's like, if the insurance is going to pay 80% and the patient's paying 20%, if it's $100, that means the patient pays $20 and the insurance is going to pay 80 of that. If you raise your fee 30%, which would get you up into like $150, something like that. And so if it's $150, then the patient's going to pay $30 and the insurance is going to pay $120. And so it's like, so I just changed that and I made more money off of the insurance, but the patient only felt a little bit off of that. They only got a $10 increase in there. Now I know that's very small numbers and stuff, but even in a crown that you're going from $800 to $1,200, the amount the patient's paying out of pocket is still less. When the insurance downgrades it to a gold crown or whatever they do, and they short us $100, I still got $1,200 out of them,
That's right.
and stuff. And so I still made significantly more than what I would have if I'd have been in network. And then the other part too is if I'm in network, I got to send an invoice to everyone. I can't write anything off.
No.
Because I've already wrote off enough, and it always creates problems with patients, and then they can't pay it, and it just creates a big headache and everything. So
I would say the one thing I love about this model, well, there's a lot of things I love about this model, but one of the things is it puts the control kind of back in your hands.
Yeah.
You have the margins to be able to make choices that you wouldn't get to make in an in-network office, and you've got the control to be able to choose the lab that you want to choose, charge patients or not charge patients. It's just, you've got a lot of control. And I think when you can use that control very wisely, it really is a beautiful business model.
It is. And you're right, like charge for things aren't, because if I take an x-ray and the insurance doesn't pay for it, then I usually just write it off.
Yeah.
I mean, in the great schemes of things, that crown was $1,200 and the insurance didn't pay me $30 for the x-ray. I still need the x-ray. I still needed it, and everything. And we try to welcome patients in. A lot of times patients are not eligible for x-rays or whatever. The first visit we take the x-rays, we don't charge them, and we just keep moving because we want to invest that time so that they come back. My big thing is building the retention so that our patients continue to come back. We'll always make up for that down the road and everything. So so that's just how we look at that part.
Well, I'm so glad you unpacked it exactly as I hoped you would. And now I'm hoping that, in a few of the episodes, Dr. Kub and I talked a lot about dropping insurances and what that looks like. And thankfully, you were kind enough to be willing to talk about your practice, because I just felt like it would be super helpful for our listeners to hear. This is not a unicorn that is not existing. Like it's a very real practice model, and you're somebody that's making it work. So.
And it does. It works. It takes work, but it does work. And I think anybody can do it. If you have a team and you can have them looking at your invoices, you can train them to do that. I'm very hands-on. I always have been, and so I don't mind doing that. But, I don't want to scare people that are like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that. Train your other people to do that, and make sure that, it's just done the way you want it done so that you can make sure the patients are taken care of. And I think it'll pay off,
I think so too. Well, thanks for joining me. I appreciate you.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.